Welcome to the Zulu One podcast. Today I'm sitting with Tammy Peterson, a courageous Canadian podcaster, writer, and speaker whose life has been marked by cancer, prayer, and a stubborn kind of hope. Through her work, she stayed close to the basics: faith, healing, beauty, and showing up in ordinary life. We're going to talk about her story, what she discovered in the middle of suffering, and the heart behind what she is building. Let's begin.
John and I met a few months ago at one of his events, and I brought a few women together, and it was very eye-opening. How would you describe your work now, especially after witnessing what went on long ago with you? I don't even remember how long it is now. It's been a few decades, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So this is a passion, and
Yeah.
it's founded in a very deep learning. And so maybe you could just tell everybody how that came about.
My calling was I was a 25, 26-year-old punk kid, right? That my mom had somehow roped me into this phenomenological weird way of uncovering hidden dynamics in family systems, right? I was in the military, I was dating all the wrong women, I was making all the wrong choices. And my mom said, "Hey, come to Romania to where she's a US diplomat. She was a retired US diplomat and was stationed in Romania at the time and had just suffered a recent loss. And her psychologist was like, "Hey, come to do this workshop." And in the Carpathian Mountains in Transylvania, former communist headquarters, right? These if you know Romania, and I know you guys know Romania well, we did with 55 Romanian psychologists this incredible work, and facilitated by a man named Alberto Iturbe, a Spanish family constellation facilitator. It's one of the original students of Bert Hellinger. And we were introduced to this incredible work. And I first thought, and I say this a lot, right? You probably heard me say this, that I thought it was that neurolinguistic programming or those people that hypnotize people. And I thought it was a scam, that they would like scour your, in those days, MySpace or Facebook to see if you had any, things, and then do the revival kind of situation. But come to find out that people that had never met me before or spoke the same language, and it was translating from Romanian into Spanish. My mom, my sister, and I all speak Spanish. And translating from Romanian into Spanish uncovered the hidden dynamics in our family systems in a way that was so profound that shattered my understanding of reality. And to say that it's grace, the presence of grace, is the only way that I can really explain it now. That there's these hidden dynamics, like Romans 12:2 says, that there's these patterns of the world, and that there's this incredible technology to uncover those and heal them and let them go, right? Integrate them and really integrate those processes into our day-to-day life.
I thought it has to do with truth.
It has to do with the foundation of reality. It's wild. Yeah. It's and that's, I've in so many, I wrote an article recently that I came back to Christ through constellations, that I found Christ in constellations. And Bert Hellinger would always say that Christ was always in the room. That profound assumption of responsibility that breaks the generational world humanity curse of the first original sin, right? That victim and the perpetrator. And I think that's the arc of constellations, and in many ways that is profoundly divine. And I don't know how else to explain it other than experience it. It's like having faith. It's like in the presence of faith, when faith becomes real.
It's so down to earth, straightforward, humble. It's quite a thing to do. I did a day with him, so it's quite a thing. So since our last conversation, which was when was it? Do you remember?
Around this time last year.
Okay, I thought so. About a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
Cultural tension has intensified politically, spiritually, and emotionally in Canada, like you said, in Venezuela, in different places in the world, and in the Middle East, and just everywhere. What do you think our society is revealing about its unresolved trauma that wasn't as visible even a year ago?
That's such a good question. So I'll relate it to my family.
Okay.
And very, very, I think it will make sense. My cousins and I have this conversation. So my mom's side of the family is from a small town in Michigan, and my dad's side of the family is from Venezuela. Actually, we immigrated from London, Ontario. So I have, we're kinfolk in some ways. Um, but we said that we peaked in 1993, right? That there was this peak, and we had this veneer that everything was okay. And underlying in the family system, there was these deep seated breaks, and that come from the run of the mill trauma that you would hear in families that you would be appalled to find out that is in other families, but in reality it's in yours. And that happened in mine. And and what ended up happening is that people started passing away, and in death and marriages and divorces and births of babies, there's cracks in the system. And the system cracks a little bit and then lets out some of these truths that for one way or another we forgot about it, or we repress that memory, and it shifts the system and it lets out some of this stuff. And in that process, the whole veneer came down, and we were presented with this opportunity. We were like, we can either deal with this stuff, heal it, and process it and work through it, or we can put our heads down in the sand and then wait until this whole thing kind of falls apart and comes apart at the seams. And in my family system, incest, abuse, all the stories that you would say if you go far back enough, they're all in my story. I come from, as I know that all of us do, come from all those dynamics, right? That if we go far back enough, we're all the sum of all those things. And those stories happen in my family. I had cousins that I lost to addiction, to disease, taken away too young. You start seeing the fragments of unresolved trauma being passed down, and you're like, why is this happening? There's these patterns that lack logic. And I think in our social systems, we're experiencing the same thing. We've gained so much mental real estate back from, it used to take all day Saturday to run errands with your parents, right? You'd say, we have to go to the grocery store, and we have to buy the screw, and then we have to do this stuff. And then we have this device that's a square of attention, and that's built on trillions of dollars to activate those unresolved trauma systems, because that's the thing that grabs your attention and lacks logic. So that's happening on a global scale, and it's giving us this incredible opportunity to say, now that we know that there's something wrong, we can do something about it and heal it. And that's the carrying of your cross, right? The carrying of your of responsibility, the ability to respond to this new information, that we can be stuck in our old patterns or we can heal. And there's this weird phenomenon that happens in families as one person starts to heal and something happens, there's something called systemic resistance. And it's the system's immune system, or whatever you want to call it, to maintain the system the same way. And so you'll see when you're on your way to do a constellation, your car won't start and the alarm won't go off, and you'll spill coffee on your shirt and all the excuses, and your kid will, have car problem or whatever, right? To say, we want to protect the system and maintain it the same. And there's this force that you have to overcome to grab it. And I think we're in the middle of that as a global consciousness, maybe. I'm not entirely sure, but there's these patterns that I see in the small and that I see in the big, that in mass scale, that are resonant, and they're the same. And it's just fascinating to see as a bystander, and know that if we don't do something about it, it can lead to the destruction of everything.
And so if you talked about this in biblical terms, what would you say?
If I talked about this in biblical terms, I think it would be Noah and the flood, right? Then it's going to say, we have this chance to actually do something before the flood happens again. And that's the repeating story, that there's this cataclysmic event that happens that wrecks everything, unless we take on this responsibility. And I think that's what the story of Christ is we literally fractured time in two. And when you match up the constellations principles, they're not anything other than religious principles. That's all it is. And it's a methodology to be able to uncover those things. And there's some weird way that about 10 to 12 people, 8 to 12 people, small group, there's such wisdom in the circle of groups. If you're either in AA, NA, or Al-Anon, and we've been sitting around fires for many years and uncovering these hidden dynamics, and there's these beautiful souls have care for each other, and we experienced that in Arizona. That it was one of the most beautiful things that I've seen is like how much care and people holding space for each other. And I think we have this opportunity to be able to do that. And more than anything now, you're somewhere in the country and I'm across the country and in the Western hemisphere, and we're talking and we're talking about these things that we would have never met each other. And we just have this massive opportunity to really heal. And I think that's what, at the end of the day, what the opportunity looks like.
It's going to take some humility. It's going to take us to be humble, willing, accepting that we have something to learn.
Yeah.
And that's exciting. If you can get by the shame and the guilt and everything, it's exciting. On the other side of it, it's light and forgiveness.
And understanding.
Put something solid under your feet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I like to say when logic is not present, entanglement to unresolved trauma is. And that somebody that you care about, that you love, that is extraordinarily intelligent, that is having this repeating pattern over and over and over again. You're like, why is this happening? This person is extraordinarily successful in many aspects of their lives. Everything that they touch turns into gold, but there's this one thing, they date the same person, or they're in a relationship with the same person over and over again. Because maybe they're trying to heal the relationship with their mother or father through that relationship. And so go back to mom and dad, the family of origin, and let's figure out what's going on there so we can heal together in that relationship rather than repeat the pattern.
And you see it in drug addiction as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And how does that play out? But generally?
So generally, it's a void that's trying to be filled with anything other than the true connection. And that disconnection is what that addiction of whatever the substance is, because it may be addicted to disconnection. Really what you're seeking is connection at the end of the day. And when that connection is reestablished, then the healing can begin.
And so people will turn to drugs rather than turning to the true relationship with God.
Correct. Yeah. And at the end of the day, the relationship with mom and dad, that's where majority of the dynamics come from, is your relationship. And they say as facilitators, you're ready to be a facilitator, not when you get the certificate, not when you graduate, not when you walk across and get the diploma. No. It's like when you heal the relationship with mom and dad, full stop. It's like, man, if I can sit in full support of mom behind my left shoulder and dad behind my right without judgment and saying simply, thank you for giving me life. Thank you for giving me life. And truly meaning that is that they came together regardless of the circumstances, regardless of if it was violent, if it was not, if it was in love, if it was in a single occasion, two people came together and we have life, and we can honor that process. I was looking at some biblical terms and talking about honoring your mother and father in Hebrew. And the word is not to, and I may be getting this wrong, so, asterisk under this one, but the word is not to honor, to say like, revere your position. It's to say, to give them their place. That the word in Hebrew is to give them the place in the family system. And that's what the orders of love and family constellations talk about. It's like, you can literally not have a relationship with mom or dad. They could be past, but in your heart or in your being, you can say, you are my parent, and I honor that position. And I'm not bigger than you. I am smaller. And I honor that chronological hierarchy in the family system, that you came before me. And because of you, I am here. And that just creates this alignment. And I feel it in goosebumps that are happening, right? That you create this alignment that we can be in our place and not carry the burdens that belong to other people.
I just wanted to say what I experienced, because it had to do with that, where I have 3 siblings. They're all older than me, but they're quite a bit older than me. So they're 5, 7, and 8 years older than me. So I always felt like I was separate from them. And I was, in a way, because they were teenagers when I was a little kid. So we didn't have a lot in common. I mean, now we're all old and we're all close. It's different. Except for there's always this feeling of me being an only child. But my mother lost a baby in between my closest sister and I. And so during your session with us, I brought that up as my
theme that you'd like to work on. Yeah.
theme that I would like to work on. And so everyone that was there took a part. So someone was my father, and someone was my mother, and someone was my brother, and my oldest sister, and my next sister. And then someone was this brother who had never been born. And he stood right beside me. And I was like, there he is. I knew he was there. Like, I knew it. And it was, I think because I was younger, it was very significant to me because he was a placeholder for me. Whereas my siblings, I think, had each other, and maybe it wasn't as significant for them because they had each other. But I was really like, where is that? And because Mom was like, oh, I just lost this baby, and it was a boy, but that was all that was said. There was never any conversation about it or anything that went through the years about what that was and who he was and who he might have been. And I don't know, would have made it more real for me, but it wasn't real for me. But after this phenomenological approach where we stood in our places, I was like, oh yeah, there he is.
Yeah.
There he is. And I feel good about that. I understand where I'm standing. Yeah. So that was my experience with that. And it seemed to make perfect sense.
Yeah. And that's more than anything. I think what constellations do, it just reveals something that we've always known. And that's more than anything, and that we're revealing and uncovering the hidden dynamics and the hidden patterns of our family system. And it's not a miracle. It's not a cure. It doesn't say, hereby in a power vested in me, you will now leave this. It doesn't. You at the end of the day have a choice to accept that information or not. And it's, as facilitators, we say we do this together. I don't do this for you. This is a journey that we're going to do together. And the reality is I don't do any of the work. The person in the chair is the one doing all the heavy lifting and going through the stuff and bringing the people out and revealing the dynamics. We're here as facilitators, and that's at the end of the day all that we really do is provide the space where that can be revealed and guide a bit people through that process. But at the end of the day, they have the choice. You can sit in that chair and see something very difficult in your family system and be like, I'm not dealing with it. Nope. And you could be like, okay. And as a facilitator, you have to respect it and say, I'm no one to save you.
So this has to all be voluntary.
Yeah, 100%. And people have to be ready for it. And sometimes they're not. And that's all. And sometimes they're never ready for it. But the beauty of it is that anybody that feels ready can start doing it for them. And that echoes through the family. There's secondary and tertiary effects about that. And Nicholas Christakis, I think he's at Yale or I can't remember, but Nicholas Christakis has this social effect in the widower effect, that if there's a couple, that have been together for a long time, if one of the partners passes, the other partner, the surviving partner, has a a significant probability of passing within the following couple years, right? But it doesn't just go to the partner; it goes to the best friend, to the closest cousin, to the sibling, to that family of origin. And I think that's the manifestation of the social phenomenon that happens. If that door swings one way, I think my suspicion, and from the anecdotal evidence that I've seen in constellations, is that it swings the other way as well. That if you have a healing effect in the social system, that echoes through. And I think the timelines is a couple years, and that's what the math looks like. And it will continue to create these challenges, but you're seeing the challenges from a new perspective and be like, this doesn't make sense. This is a family system pattern. This is something that we haven't looked at yet in this. And then you create this awareness that gives you back the agency. Rather than systems leading us, we can start to begin to understand how these systems have effects on us. And it's just so full of hope that we can actually do something about it, right? It's hard, but we can do something about it.
Things that are true are hard.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Ever since I have come after my conversion, life has got way more difficult. But it isn't. But I don't misunderstand it. And so I think it gives me more courage to persevere. Before, maybe I was kind of iffy about things. But now I don't feel so iffy. I feel like pretty committed now.
Solid.
And so it's a different feeling.
So can I ask you a question?
Sure.
After we did the constellation, have you seen things in your orbit shift and soften and things get tighter and looser? How have you? Because it takes up to a couple years. So
things are really wavy.
I would imagine.
Yeah, not in my life.
Okay.
but in the people around me, it's just
Mm,
born like this.
yeah. Yeah. Because there's an effect. And I think we talked about it in the workshop. There's an effect that happens that you're taking the snow globe and you're shaking it, and everything kind of falls back into its place. And it's such a powerful movement to see how that affects different people in the family system. And this is a little bit of hope on my side, right? Is that we started this journey in 2000. My mom started in 2006, and then I was in 2008. We recently did a constellation where my dad, of all people, like this, Latin, Hispanic, very machista, love him to death. He's my father. I love him to death. But he was sitting in a constellation and sitting next to us and doing the family constellation. And my mom was there. My sister was there. We lost my mother and my mom and dad lost their first pregnancy. That child was represented in the family system. It's like, this is the picture that we're supposed to be. And my dad was in a constellation after all these years that, old dog don't learn new tricks type, the whole stories that we tell ourselves. And it was just so profoundly moving and humbling to see my dad. Now I talk to him and he's like, yeah, the person really struggles with their relationship with their mom and dad. And you're like, who are you? This is amazing, right? That you're like, man, it's just it makes me emotional to say, how fulfilling this could look like. And there's a million things that I could be upset about. And there's a million things that everybody could be upset about. And I don't judge. And I say, I can have my opinion about stuff. And I can say, maybe, there's certain things that I wouldn't do the same as you, but I honor me being your son. It's like, that's amazing. And our relationship is so strong now. And it's really beautiful. So that readjusting has effects in the family system. But there was times in those 20 years that I was at odds with my father, and we had very difficult, and we had a lot of challenges, but little by little you work through them and do the stuff. And I can say, man, after all these years, I have an incredible relationship with both of them. It's beautiful. I feel so fulfilled, and it makes my children stronger, right? It makes my kids stronger because they're fully supported by their lineage. And it's such a blessing. And I don't have any other choice but to scream this from the rooftops as loud as I can.
Many women carrying invisible family roles: the emotional stabilizer, the peacemaker, the overfunctioner, the strong one. How do these roles emerge from family systems, and what do they quietly cost a woman in marriage, motherhood, and her spiritual life? That's a good question.
That's a great question. That's an outstanding question. We talk about these archetypes, and we see archetypes all the time, right? The woman that marries their son, not their spouse, right? That it's not a partnership, it's they marry a child. And so they're like, that's not an equal relationship. And so that creates resentment. It creates a resentment loop. It's like, you're supposed to be my child, not supposed to be my spouse, or you're your mother's spouse rather than being mine. And so there's these dynamics that and this happened to me in relationships at the beginning, right? I was trying to find, because I was entangled with my mother, I was trying to find a relationship with a woman that would mother me, right? Because I was my mother's partner in some way, in some emotional way, right? And so I'd find out, and the woman would be like, this is not my responsibility is not to fix you. I'm like, why not? And it wasn't until I healed that relationship that I found my wife, right? And I found a person that I'm equal to, and that we're a part in a true partnership. I think that's a part that does it as well. But if you're the emotional partner of your father, there's no space for your spouse, and so you take on things that don't belong to you.
What happens to the spouse?
Yeah, that they'll drift away.
Oh,
One of the children will take on the position of the partner as well.
so say it's the daughter and the father
Yep.
that have too close a relationship,
Mhm.
that are on equal footing rather than father-daughter.
Correct.
So then the husband is lost.
Yeah.
So then the relationship with the daughter can be elevated.
Correct. Because they'll find a partnership in that in one of the children. So you constantly have to be creating those boundaries, right? And say, no, and because that comes from a pattern in the family system. There's a pattern that comes on that we take on a responsibility that doesn't belong to us. My cousin, and God rest his soul, is we're a family that has extraordinarily dark jokes, right? And all the trauma and all the stuff, we've gone through it all and laughed and cried through all of it. But we would be, this is a very profoundly touching story, but for me, emotional, right, is that my aunt developed cancer, right, and she went to pick up an envelope and broke her hip. It metastasized to her femoral head, and what ended up happening is that it was angiosarcoma, and she died within about a year. But before that, she was in a constellation, and the facilitator said, "This problem is really hard. This is a really difficult problem, but if you work on it for 2 years, you'll be okay on the other side of it." He said, she had 3 boys. These 2 boys are the ones that are most in trouble, that are most, because they were represented in the constellation. Well, come to find out, he was a captain in the Air Force, special ops guy, was in Afghanistan, elite athlete, Air Force Academy, did a combine for the NFL, super athlete. But we would joke that that's my aunt's boyfriend. It's like, oh, so when she was passing, we would be like, oh, her youngest son, that kind of path his own way, was joking. It's like, yeah, when we went to pick him up at the airport, it's like, yo, long distance relationships are really tough. So we were all laughing about, this entanglement that happens in the family, because comedy has a way of lifting those truths up, right? And come to find out, about a year later, he developed a different type of cancer that manifests in the same exact place. It was his left hip. He had a pelvindectomy. Half of his whole left leg was removed, and he died within a short period of time. And his mom, this makes me so emotional, said he died in the same town, right, in the same place. We had my grandmother's place that everybody would go to die to during this 10-year period. Thank God that's over. But she came and said, "Kid, you have 3 days." She came to get him. And so he said, "I just want to be with my mom." She was so loyal. And there's a book by Stephen Hausner called Even It Cost Me My Life, that he took on that pain, but he was her emotional partner. That was her boyfriend, right? We would all joke about it in the family, and take on this pain that didn't belong to him. But because there was a deep, deep, deep father wound in my family system. And all the boys of all the different, my mom's sisters took on this relationship that was an inappropriate dynamic. And it happened. It's so common. It's so common. It's not, oh, woe is me, I'm the only people in the world that this is happening to. It's a very, very, very common dynamic that happens in family systems.
It's probably almost a natural response to the loss without proper spiritual intervention.
We see those are Jungian archetypes. We see these stories happen over and over again. The biblical stories have all these stories built into them. So it's not really news. It's not anything that I discovered. I certainly didn't discover any of this information. It's just, you start recognizing patterns after you've been doing this for a little while. I was like, oh, that's what that is. That's what that is. Without judgment, everybody goes through it. You just really, and our job is to be the facilitator to help people unentangle those things, because our kids will inherit that same pattern as well.
So it's worthwhile doing.
Oh, yeah.
In our last conversation, you described the shift from wounded father archetype to the wounded, overprotected mother archetype in culture. How are you seeing that play out now in families, especially for women trying not to over-control or emotionally absorb their children?
I think now those chickens are coming home to roost. Now we're seeing a whole generation of broken boys, of just broken men and broken boys, because women had to take on too much. And what ends up happening is that when a mother is wounded in that way, they'll repress or steal their boy's masculinity, and they'll say, "Anybody but you won't do that to me." And it's like, man, it's the devouring mother that I've heard so much talk about, right? I've heard Dr. Peterson talk about this. It's like, that's where that wound comes from. I think it comes from a wounded father. And when women fix their relationship or heal their relationship with their father, then they can accept the masculinity of their male child. And a lot of the, I think, destruction of current society that we see is this cycle that happens, that, the wounded mother is raising a wounded boy, and then that wounded boy ends up being, you get a lot of wounded boys together and they tear down everything.
So this happens, let me see. So there's a father, and the father and the daughter, there's a problem with their relationship, an entanglement in the beginning. And that's because the mother, so if the father and the daughter are having an entanglement, then that's the wounded mother you're talking about,
there's different flavors of this, what it ends up being, depending on what the trauma looks like, depending on what the trauma kind of script looks like. these take on two different things. If the mother was abused by the father, the mother has these are just probabilities and risk. The mother will have, if she has a boy, has a risk of like suppressing the masculinity or grabbing them so close that they'll never hurt anybody again type of situation, right? And I think that's the pattern that we see in our social system. And I think that's what the rise of these certain movements came from, was that wounded archetype.
Women, because there's a birth control pill, women have given up their agency to have their boundaries properly set. Now they're like, oh, well, we're in bed, like we're 16 and we're in bed, and he expects this, and I'm in bed, so I've already pretty much said yes, and so they end up compromising themselves, and that wounds a woman. And who knows what it does to the man, because now he's taking advantage of a woman outside of wedlock. And that's a big deal in our society now since the beginning of the 60s. So who knows what that has done?
And I'm not, I haven't seen that dynamic come up in constellations. The dynamic that I've seen is that may be a secondary or tertiary effect of the original wound, of that wound with mom and dad that happens and they're usually abandonment, abuse, neglect, emotional unavailability, of all those things that we repeat these patterns. And in some ways we find these social systems that socially we create scaffolding around like broken systems.
It's a broken scaffolding.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And then that's where you start seeing, in like the divorce industrial complex, right? There you see people wanting to destroy their partner. It's like, all you're really doing is destroying kids. And you're creating a full generation of kids that had to pick between mom and dad, when regardless of what the circumstances and the outcome are, we can say, I wish the father of my children or the mother of my children the best, because if they're strong and they're successful and even if our relationship dissolved, I can wish them the best for the sake of my children. And in some, it might have been a difficult relationship, whatever that is, you can from a distance say, I wish you the best, from a healed position, not from the wounded, the dynamic that happened. And that's a really powerful dynamic. And you start seeing, I did this is my personal relationship, right? Happy to talk about it. But, I started doing constellations at the beginning, and I was like, working on my marriage with my wife and going through those processes. And I would be like, my mom's my best friend. I'm like, no. My mom's my mom. My wife is my best friend. And so you would see, I did a constellation where my mother was too close to me, and my wife's like, all right, dude, whenever you're ready. And so I had this patience from my wife. That's she's just a gem that was like trusting enough that I was working through these dynamics, because I have those wounds in my family system, to say that. And that's why I understand it at a very visceral level. And that's the wounded male, right? The wounded male that I had to join the military, and I was at odds with my father, and I was at a peer level with my father. So I'd have all this contention with him. And he was like, I would try to parent him and be like, no, you're my dad. I got to be in my position as a child. Dad, you do you, whatever you want to do. You're the parent. I'm the little one. And I, for many years, had to reestablish that relationship in myself to make my marriage stronger and make my kids stronger. And everything in my life is, the more I've healed, the more I can show up from a place of connection and alignment, rather than from a place of broken scaffolding.
You describe judgment as the thing that entangles us most deeply with those who wounded us. How does that actually show up inside marriages and family, where resentment has been building for years?
I talk about forgiveness a lot. And, I've really wrestled with this, because when this concept comes up, people their cultural systemic resistance comes in. It's like, we have to forgive people. It's like, we're no one to forgive. Only God can forgive. Like, because that puts me in the higher position than the person, and says, I absolve you of the sins or the wrong that you've committed. And I have the power to do that. I'm like, I'm no one to do that. What we can do is I can say, I see this for what it is. That's it. You can really say, and I can see this for what it is solid grounding for us not to be entangled with the dynamic, right? And judgment holds us in a rigid, frozen position against the thing that we're judging. if we have an opinion about it, it creates a little bit of movement, especially with our parents. And I think we talked about this in the last podcast. It's like when we're judging somebody, it's not like using your sound judgment to navigate the world, right? It's like, I shouldn't do that. I should do that. I should, we're talking about more the righteous judgment, a judgment that's saying, I am better. At the end of the day, that all evil in the world comes from this simple phrase. And Gary Stewart taught me this about Bert, is that all evil in the world comes from the phrase, I am better. And that's what judgment as its root is that if you literally go to court, the judge is at a higher level than everybody else. They're taking on the position of the throne of God. They're saying, I am the arbiter of what is good and what is wrong. It's like, no. That is only for God. We can have an agreement, and that's what laws are in some ways. Be like, I'm going to agree not to trespass, and I'm going to agree not to cut you off in traffic or use my blinker or whatever those dynamics is. We can have agreements as a society, but I'm not going to say I am better than you. And judgment entangles us to those outcomes. And when we stop judging our parents, and that's where a lot of these wounds come from, that we judge our parents because like, you abandoned me, I wasn't there, I wasn't cared for, I was hurt, and then this righteousness comes over us. We're at very high risk to repeat the same pattern. We repeat the pattern through that judgment. But if I say, I honor you as my parent, and I'm going to do, and please bless me if I choose to do things differently. You can create a little bit of distance and create opinion and be like, I can be grateful for, and maybe you had the most difficult relationship with parents. And certainly being in Romania, we saw a lot of that. There was some really dark stuff. Say, I'm going to create some distance, and I can send you love from afar. And that softens the dynamic, that it can heal and fall into a place of alignment rather than entanglement. That's really what judgment is at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's a control.
Mm-hmm. And we live in a social system that all it does is judges. Just judge, mm-hmm. judge. Everything is these micro judgments on, and again, this $1 trillion device that is pointing us towards judging everything, and it creates, I think, the society that we're living in now. It's this broken scaffolding that is arrested everything together, and we all know that we're careening towards an absolute disaster, and we're all like, "Hey, guys, who's driving the train?" It's like, it's the momentum that's driving the train. The momentum is going to careen us off the mountain. The momentum is going to lead to 150 million deaths in the 19th century, right? The 20th century, excuse me. Those are when you start seeing that victim perpetrator start taking into social systems, and you're like, oh, now I understand. Now I understand that they were taken by a momentum that was fueled by judgment, by righteousness. It's like this mental parasite that happens that leads to some of the most horrific things that have happened in social systems.
What do you think's going on with the gender confusion? Or it's like, I'm not in the right body. This idea that you don't feel real, right? It's almost like you don't feel real. Oh, if I change this, maybe I'll feel real. There's definitely some woundedness there. There's definitely woundedness there. I don't know where it comes from, but
seen from constellations, entanglement takes on different flavors, and those different flavors are, and I think there's an aspect of social contagion, but there's also, when you start seeing it for what it is, for this entanglement, is be like, there's an underlying trauma dynamic here, and we can create a space where that underlying trauma dynamic is held to be able to be healed, rather than to perpetuate those patterns of pain.
If everybody is in their proper place, father, mother, the people back, your siblings beside you and everything, if that is askew, then maybe one person thinks, oh, I'm the daughter, but my mother, there's something with my mother. If I was a boy.
Yes.
Oh dear.
Or you're representing a child that wasn't acknowledged in the family system.
Right. Oh,
and
yeah.
that has degrees, and the degrees vary from, and like how Jan Jacob Stam talks about this in organizational systemic leadership. There's three consciousness. There's three levels of consciousness: the consciousness of the individual, the consciousness of the group, and then the evolutionary force. And how I like to say it is like a river, right? You have salmon in a river, and they're going upstream, and they're doing their thing. That one salmon knows that it's a salmon, right? Well, metaphor here, right? That one, I know that I am, and you know that you are, and we know that we are, right? But there's a systemic momentum that's about the group, and the group follows and adapts to the individuals, but they kind of keep moving forward and they do their thing. And if they get to a collective rock, they all kind of go around the rock, and you see the person in front of you, and you're kind of caught in a momentum that's subconscious, right? That you're like, I'm going to go, if you've ever driven to work and you just like forgot about work, you're in that subconscious momentum. You're like, I'm thinking, listen to the radio or thinking about, God knows what. And then you suddenly teleported to work. That's that a phenomenon that happens. And then there's the evolutionary force. The evolutionary force is that if there's a drought and the river dries, all the water goes away. Or suddenly the river goes into the ocean, and the ocean has a different pH level and then all the salmon die. Or the climate changes, or the weather changes, and everything gets really cold. That's evolutionary force. It doesn't care about the individuals or the group. It just happens, and all we can really do is adapt to it. I think this is those three levels of phenomenon that we're, as individuals, we can have the agency to deal with our stuff. But if the social contagion says, if I heal, then I can be the thought leader of that group. I can shift the evolutionary force, or I can shift my group to do another dynamic, to see another way. But the evolutionary force is going to happen regardless of, that's the modern internet, that's healthcare, that's modern sewerage, that's world wars. Those things happen. But I think the more we heal as a social system, the more influence we have on those larger groups. And we can literally careen our ways away from catastrophe rather than repeating the pattern. So when we're talking about this, it gets, you say it gets darker, it gets darkest before dawn. I think we're in that place that we're saying, hey, these types of conversations, I think that's why they're so important. And I find this as a calling, is that we can actually help people heal. And if they make the choices that they make them without the entanglement. They make them based on what they truly feel, not based on the systemic momentum of the group.
You can see what's going on in your society, and you want to change it. You have to change it at the individual level.
Yes.
You have to. There's no other change. And you have no agency any further than that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's the only thing that we can control is our reaction. I mean, it's just, this is biblical, right? At the end of the day, it's like, it's bear your cross, assume your responsibility,
bear your cross.
Bear your cross. Yeah, exactly. Right here, right? It's right here, right? So it's bear your cross. And that's what, at the end of the day, that's what it is. It's the only thing. And that's what responsibility is. It's that compounded word, the ability to respond. Because if we're frozen in trauma, we're frozen in the systemic momentum, we're doing that teleporting drive to work, we don't have agency. And when we're outraged, it's the same thing. We're triggered by the stuff that we haven't dealt with, and it all comes bearing in. And you say, man, my argument with my wife is not about all the times that I wasn't seen or heard when I was a child. It's just, we're having a discussion about the thing. So it's a 3 rather than being a 10 on the trauma scale, right? It's a 3 that we're like discussing. Hey, I don't agree with that. Okay, let's hear your point. You hear my point. We can figure it out and move forward as a relationship, rather than being I'm not seen or I'm not heard, and I'm in the position of emotional entanglement with my mother or with my father, and he didn't see me and I wasn't heard about. Like, all those things come barreling out of the discussion bucket and then blow the relationship up. It seems like that's the mechanism of these dynamics, based on the work that you and I've experienced on the constellation side.
Do you often work within families, or is it usually strangers that come together?
So both.
Both.
Yeah, both. It's usually strangers that come together, or people that are loosely connected. How
do you actually get a family? Because that means everybody has to be voluntarily there. That sounds like a miracle to me.
So that's, I recently did this with a friend of mine, and she hosts constellations for me here in South Florida. And she brought mom, dad, her cousins, her uncle, aunt and uncle, she brought the whole bit, and they were like 40% of the group that we had. But the others were friends and people that knew them, but not super close to them. So that is 100% doable. And we did that. You have to be careful, because I'll do that exercise that you have 2 people that meet, and we did that exercise that 2 people meet, and one represents, their mother or their inner child, or they represent you. You want to make sure that you don't pair up people that are familiar, that are a spouse, spouses, or a child or a parent. Like, you want to kind of mix the group up a little bit, but you don't need a massive amount of people to be able to shift those things. So if you have a group of friends, extended family that are interested in doing something like this, you can mix the group up with that. But I also, this has been, I recently did this with my I have a group that I'm in the car business, right? So I do technology and IT and cybersecurity for car dealers. And I brought systemic constellations to my group. And so I had this group of business owners that were sitting in a circle at one of our conferences. And I had these plushies, and the plushies that you saw me do, right? And I had everybody really knew each other.
Tell me a little bit, what are the plushies?
So the plushies is, so you buy them at the local family constellation store called Five and Below, right? So it's just these nondescript little plushies. It's kind of like a cactus. It's a pillow. Yeah, one's a pillow, one's a cactus, one's like a green kind of thing. They're just, plushy. That they can literally represent anything. And I have a medicine ball. I have an 8-pound medicine ball. And you can put those things in the field and literally put a sticky note on them as a representative of something, and you can work through the dynamics in that thing. I don't know where it comes from. It doesn't make any sense. It's completely phenomenological. Most people will call me crazy, and I'm okay with that. But it is the foundation of reality that is emergent in this process. And that's, you can use those two as these to bring out the dynamics, if that makes sense.
When you witness an adult child finally seeing their parents not as villains, but as wounded people in a long chain of pain, what usually breaks open inside them emotionally or spiritually in that moment?
Understanding. Empathy is a terrible word, as I'll suffer with you.
I've been researching that. It's taking the place of sympathy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's taking the sympathy and having compassion, and having the I with feeling see this is compassion with passion. With my feelings, I see this. I see this really for truly what it is. And that's like, you can see your parents as humans. When we're kids, we see our parents as like these arbiters of the universe, right? They're like these omnipotent people that can, if they're not around, we don't survive, right? And then you can say, no, actually, they made mistakes, and they had issues, and they went through difficulties, and they won and they lost, and they made challenge choices, but I take them fully as they are. And that's like such a powerful statement. It's like, I take you fully as you are with everything. Even regardless of the story, I take you in fully as you are. And that really creates understanding, and it softens the relationship. And you may be doing this with somebody that is truly, by social standards, a very challenging person. And you can create distance, not exclusion, distance. And if they're being okay, that you can get a little bit closer. And that's what opinion really does. Gives you some flexibility of getting closer as needed or getting farther away. And you can send them love from afar, and you can wish them the best. I think that's the proper dynamic to be able to be in.
How generational trauma quietly shapes a woman's inner world, right? The anxiety, the self-doubt, the people-pleasing, the overfunctioning. And she doesn't consciously choose them either. They happen to her. They happen to her, I guess, because of the dynamics of the relationships that they grow up in. And so the relationship isn't, there's leaning on each other, right? When you should be standing on your own, you're trying to get from someone something that you're missing.
Yeah.
And then you warp that relationship. Yeah, because you're not centered and trusting that you're going to get what you need.
A lot of that is inner child work, because we disconnect from our inner child when we're wounded. And that joy and that connection and that alignment that we have, this inner child, that I can go back, and in family constellations, we bring the inner child alive. It's like, okay, because let's say, and this is kind of real world stuff, right? Let's say there was a mother that had a difficult pregnancy, and mother got sick at the beginning, and she had to be taken away, or was in the hospital, and the baby was raised by grandmother, or whatever that dynamic, that early disconnection from mother, because that's our first line of love, right? And especially the mother-daughter connection is so difficult, because 3 generations of women are in that pregnancy, because the base ingredients of the next generation are already in the baby's womb, right? The female child's womb, carrying by the mother, and all the dynamics that the mother's feeling. And if they went through war, if they went through exile, if they went, are all being intergenerationally transmitted from one generation to the other. And you start seeing, like, that's not one person, that's three people connected. And so it's a delicate dynamic when we see that. And 3 is an important number religiously, right? Like, you see the present, future, and the past. You see all of this, really created in one person. And the world has its dynamics. There's stuff that we can control and stuff that we can't. But when we abandon that inner child because we have to disconnect in order to survive, we can go back in family constellations and reconnect with that inner child and bring that inner child back into our heart. And so much of our misalignment as human beings come from a disconnection of early childhood from our inner child, because of fear, anxiety, abandonment, all the normal world happenings.
You've said that if victims don't heal, they become perpetrators.
The victim perpetrator entanglement.
Yeah. So what do you think why do you think this truth is so hard for people to accept? What happened to a society that keeps denying it? If victims don't heal, they become perpetrators. And they also, I find, if there's someone who's playing out the victim, they force the perpetrator onto the person.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's creepy.
That's wild. And it's such an incredible observation, because and it goes back to this momentum. The theater has been set, and everybody has their own place and setting to play, and everybody has been giving their scripts. And when you're, I've had this happen in my life, that I've been taken over by a momentum, right? And I've certainly been the perpetrator in somebody's stories. There's people out there that I think that I am the villain in their story, and they're totally 100% right. And I've also been in that victim, in the righteous victim position. It's like, how could I be wounded and abandoned? And that creates the dynamic for me to recreate that catastrophic dynamic. And it goes back to Cain and Abel. It goes back to the righteousness of the victim and the perpetrator. And that, I think I talked about this a bit, but I represented in a constellation. I was going through doing my own stuff, right? And I was wearing all black, and I was picked to be the perpetrator, to represent the perpetrator in 3 different constellations. And I'm like, weesh, yay. And so Michelle was the one that was facilitating the constellation for us. And, there was this person that was going, that they're ethnically from Russia, and it was a minority that had been, ethnically cleansed, and it was a difficult dynamic. And I was the representative of the perpetrator, the meta perpetrator. And the victim was looking at me and was like, how could you, the righteousness, right? The righteous indignation. And I was the representative the feelings that I felt as a representative was like, who do you think you are? You need me as much as I need you. We're 2 faces of the same coin. I'm just filling my part as much as you're filling yours. It doesn't absolve you of the responsibility of what happened, but it sure does give you the agency to do something about it, right? That I say, if I identify as a victim, I can be like, okay, what can I do about it? What responsibility can I take? And I think that's the meta narrative of, and people may lose their minds when I say this, but the meta narrative of the Bible is Jesus literally took on the responsibility of the world and sacrificed himself for everything to break that curse. That's the curse that destroys everything. That victim perpetrator, the righteousness, that constant struggle between the pattern that is recreating victims and perpetrators and victims and perpetrators, and through radical responsibility, we can break that curse. It's like that makes me so emotional to think about that, to say, man, this is beautiful. It is the most profound thing that I've ever come across, to say that if I step up and have the courage to take on the world, to take on the most difficult parts of me, that I can heal, and I can let these things go and live in grace and alignment.
So if one person has healed in a family,
Mm-hmm.
but the family is still under the throes of all of the enmeshment and everything like that, but it's at a time where there is urgency, how do you go about bringing it up?
One of the things that's most difficult was, man, this is so hard for me to say, and it's so hard for me to, because we went through this, and it's the thing about constellations is also respecting people's choices, and we saw, with my aunt and with my cousin, it's like they're careening towards a disaster, And it's like, it's still so heart wrenching for me and I wrote an article about it recently. It's just like so heart wrenching to see my aunt stand there and say no. And we, like, at the end of the day, had to like respect her choice and be like, oh, like, just, it was just so, I mean, for me still now is so gut wrenching to see this. And that's where the loyalty part is. Like, I don't think the strongest force on the planet is love. I think it's loyalty. It's like, we'll make people that are incredible make wild choices, like to say, I don't want to see, it's too painful to see what this is, because they're so loyal to that broken system. But I do think that there's hope in that once somebody, like, the process starts, like, that echoing in the family system, and there'll be cracks and there'll be little things and little opportunities, and opportunities have to come up. And, for so many of my friends and people that I've talked to, I've lost a lot of friends through constellations, right? It's that people just are like, I'm not with that vibe of healing and the weird stuff that you do. I'm going to do my thing. Like, perfect. I understand. When you're ready, let me know and we can do something. And you kind of lose people along the way, and it's like very lonely and when you take on this journey. But there's this thing that there's this shifting that happens in the family, and you start, like, when you start seeing the stuff and you start seeing it in culture. And I think trauma blinds us of pathways that you just fill up the script. And what we were talking about earlier on the victim perpetrators is like, oh, here's the script. When I'm having this argument about this stuff, it's about abandonment, it's about stuff. I'm going to load up the script, and every time you blah, 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 and always, and every time. And you kind of see this always and every time. And I can't believe, and you go through this righteousness, right? I think the same thing happens in the family, right? But then that script shifts. And when you no longer participate in the dynamics, it's like a song that doesn't resolve. Like, it goes through the chords and then it hits like a dissonant chord. There's a dissonance in the family system. And then everybody goes, every time I played this happened. And that made me feel comfortable. And now it's not happening. So I can either choose to learn a new song, or figure out if my instrument's wrong, or try other ways of making sure that the thing happens. And you're like, nope, that doesn't happen. Right. And you can almost feel the trap, like the trap's happening. You're like, oh, here's the trap. And now that you're on the other side of it, you're like, there's a trap right there. I'm not going to do it. And the person's like, they have a little bit of tantrum, right? You're like, I thought every time I was going to do this was going to happen. And now it's not.
How can you do that? You're cruel. You're mean. You won't play fair anymore.
Yeah, exactly. It's wild. It's so, and that part creates maybe this isn't the play that we have to do. Maybe there's another way to do this. And there's a million books out there that talk about constellation. There's a million books talking about these dynamics.
Is there a good book you like?
Yeah, Mark Wolyn's book, It Didn't Start With You, is a good one. This is one of my favorite books, and it shook my foundation, is Dan Booth Cohen's I Carry Your Heart in My Heart. And it's family constellations in prison. And he was at Bay State Prison for 5 years. Oh my gosh. It's the presence of grace. It really is, because you see people that did horrific things.
Yeah.
And restoring the dignity to the perpetrator, and like to just be that story of Christ of like, to the thief, that is like, I will see you in the kingdom of heaven, is like, it's just that I get emotional. That every person is redeemable. Yeah. Like that nothing is lost, and that through the forgiveness of Christ and the forgiveness of God, that we all are redeemable, that we all are, that we have the spirit of grace that is in all of us, that is just, even in the deepest, darkest and most places of despair, that we can come back and be redeemable. It's just, it's difficult for me. It's glorious. Yes. It's in the presence of glory. And
every Sunday there's a glorious day. That's a glorious mystery. It's glorious.
Yeah.
That's what that means.
That's what that means. And there was a place that opened in my brain, and there's a door that I can see almost like underneath a crack. And the magnitude of the presence of God is so big that I want to throw myself on the ground. And I'm like, I'm not worthy of being in the presence of this. It's just catastrophically earth moving and reality shattering for me, that, we get to do this. And sorry for
that's all right.
but yeah.
Yeah, that's the part, and I think Dan's book does that. This is so embarrassing. I was on a flight, and it's this tiny little book, and I was flying with my wife to Chicago or something, and I'm reading this book. Thank God I'm on the window aisle, because I was like, I'm going through this book, and there's a portion of it that's just gut wrenching and so profoundly beautiful, and I'm sobbing on the flight. I'm like putting the book over my face, and I'm like, cover me. I don't want to be sobbing in front of everybody on this flight. So, but it is a profoundly, that book is one of the ones that changed it for me.
I want to write this book down. So tell me again
Yeah,
what it's
I
called.
Carry Your Heart,
I Carry Your Heart.
Your Heart and My Heart by Dan Booth Cohen. It's family constellations in prison. Yeah, that book changed me, because it talks about, and he did his PhD on this book. It was his thesis of his PhD, and it's very well cited. And it really talks about just that redemptive power. It's incredible. It's the,
From your perspective, what's the most dangerous spiritual lie being sold under the language of healing today?
your truth.
Oh, yeah, right. That's a bad one.
Your truth. Like, that is like, your truth just puts you in. That is not your truth is one of the most dangerous things that you can, well, this is my truth. I was like, no, it's your perspective. Yeah. And that perspective may be broken, right? Right. May be entangled with this trauma, because it gives everybody the permission to be on the throne of God. It's like, no, truth is not something that you possess. It is something that is emergent.
If you could speak one sentence to people stuck blaming their parents but refusing to move forward, what would you tell them?
Don't think that you could have done it better. Don't think that if you were to have been in the same circumstances and doing the same thing, that you would have done it any better. That you weren't, if you were in their shoes, that you would have made different choices.
Yeah, that's a very good thing to say. Because otherwise, you're always thinking, if that was me, I would.
Yeah, the hindsight is like a power of hindsight. Like, if you were in that situation, that's wild. Yeah, to think that we're so all knowing and all that we would have made a difference. No, yeah, that we're flawed. We're all flawed.
What does it look like practically to give a burden back in daily life, not just in a constellation workshop, but in how someone thinks, speaks, and reacts at home?
I like to think, when something like this comes up, what's the thing behind the thing? I read Chris Voss's Never Split the Difference, that book. It's like there's always a thing behind the thing. And that's when in constellation work, I'm always looking, it's like, what's behind this? Where's the logic not present? And I can say that gives me the ability to not take it personally, which is great. And I'm like, I'm choosing not to participate in your dynamic. Right. And so that's like, that's a powerful sentence to say, I'm choosing not to participate in that dynamic. And you can create space rather than fulfilling the role, because the role, and we're going back to the victim perpetrator, right? That role is so enticing to fill, because it activates all the wounds in us. And mentally, and I try to do this prayer meditation, is like, God, just let me carry what only belongs to me, and give back everything that doesn't. And say, and I can say that from and I have the meditations, but like, let me just carry what belongs to me and give back everything that doesn't. And you can, that dynamic creates why am I participating? Why am I again in this pattern? I run my business that way. I run my relationships that way. My relationship with my wife. If I keep making the wrong decision, I'm like, okay, all right, I made a wrong decision here. I made a wrong decision here. I did this again. What have I not seen? What I haven't given back? What am I still fulfilling out of loyalty that doesn't belong to me? And I'll just try to make that mental note to see what can I give back, and I'll do I often be like, man, I haven't worked that dynamic out, because that pattern keeps presenting in my life.
And how would you then work through a constellation on that yourself?
Oh, I'll say something like, there's a let's say a dynamic at work that I have a difficult relationship with one of my team members, and I'm like, man, so I'll talk to somebody and I'll be like, am I wrong here? Am I fulfilling something? And I may be blindly completing the circuit for this person. So I'll literally go into a constellation and be like, I would like to do a systemic constellation. I want to work on my relationship with this person and what this person is representing in my in my life, and we'll bring up that dynamic. And it might be like, I have a sticky note here on somewhere on my computer that literally says, work on this dynamic. And I'll go into the constellation, like, I want to work on this, and make sure that I'm approaching it with the care and the attention that it needs. And I'll work on that dynamic specifically. And then over the next 2 years, it will literally disappear. It's wild. I was literally able to shift the full dynamic of my organization and other people's organizations through family constellations or systemic constellations that they were careening towards disaster and now are thriving because the leader of the organization takes on the dynamics of the leader. And so the more we heal, the more our organization heals, and the more alignment we can create, and the more it's like magic. It's wild. It is truly wild. And so I work on that portion that I say, I like to work on this dynamic, and I specifically say that.
Sounds practical.
Yeah, it's very, if I'm anything, I'm practical, right?
Yeah.
But if I have a dynamic with a mom and dad, I do a prayer meditation that I say, I give this back to you. In love, I took it. In love, I give it back. You hold it in your hand. And there's this meditation that I hold in my hand, and I say, it's like, feel the size of it. Feel the size of it, the weight of it, the color. And you really hold it in your hand, whatever that thing is. If that's anxiety, if that's abandonment, if that's self-worth, if that's, self-talk, if whatever that is, that's like negative self-talk, whatever that is, you hold it in your hand, and you in your mind, look at your parents and say, in love, I took this, and in love, I give it back. And you literally give it back to where it belongs. It's like, this no longer belongs to me.
What are the signs that someone's repeating a family pattern, even if their life looks very different on the surface from their parents' life? I think if there's trouble.
And when somebody's out of alignment, they just look, the story. So, how they say history repeats itself? I don't think it repeats itself. I think it often rhymes. So the rhyming of a problem is similar, right? And you talk to somebody, it's like, if they bring up a pattern that doesn't have logic, you take a step away from the pattern. It's like, what's the pattern really about? Is it about not being seen? Is it about being too close? Is it about control? Is it about controlling that person? Is it about talking down to that person? Is it about them fulfilling a role, the expectations that you don't have? And then when you start putting clarity to the problem, like, where in my system did I feel that I wasn't seen, that I wasn't heard, that I wasn't given my place, that I don't have the relationship with my inner child, that I don't have those things? And you're like, that's a pattern. I can put it in a constellation. I can work on it. So it's like that rhyming. You've probably met people that they have dated the same person over and over again.
Yes.
It's like, you're dating your mother.
Well,
right?
and he did John over and over and over again.
Yeah. It's like, you're dating your mother. Go to the root, your relationship with your mother. The relationship between siblings, that's like, you're out of order in the family system. You're taking the position of the first child rather than the third, because there was a child that wasn't recognized in the family system. I had massive conflict, not massive conflict. I had constant conflict with my sister. And that conflict with my sister came from, I'm really the middle child, and I act like a middle child. I feel like a middle child. I know I'm number two. I'm not number one. I've always been that way. I'm very much, my personality is of a middle child, but I'm the firstborn because my parents lost it. And then my sister jumped me, and she would try to be the oldest sister. And I'm like, you're not the oldest. You're the third. You're the youngest. You're the baby. And so a lot of our conflict came from her wanting to tell me what to do and to do this stuff. I'm 2 years older than she is, right? It was like that dynamic happened. But that as she's done her work and I've done my work, that dynamic is now appropriate. She's number 3. I'm number 2. And there's a number 1. There's a firstborn. And the child order is extraordinarily important.
What's one small, spiritually aligned step someone can take this week to move from entanglement towards freedom in their family system?
Take 3 deep breaths. Imagine your mother and your father in front of you and say, thank you for giving me life. And that's enough.
How has becoming a father changed the way you approach healing, responsibility, and masculinity compared to before you had children?
Becoming a father softened me in many ways. And I had a business partner to talk about holding things lightly, like an egg, rather than white knuckling things. And I think holding things lightly. So my oldest was in the NICU he was born at 32 and a half weeks. And so that was, man, just to be like the fragility of life, and this precious being that you literally would do anything for. You're running down and you're taking
the little bit of breast milk that my wife was pumping at the time, and we're driving down to, my son was born in Mount Sinai, Miami Beach. We're like flying down there during work hours to bring the little bit of, milk that she had to this little baby in this NICU. Really puts things into perspective. The fact that I've seen my stuff in real time go into my kids and be like, that doesn't belong to you. That's mine. So I got to deal with it. And so there's this just like little reflective pattern, and you can real time, I don't know how else to say this, but troubleshoot your systems with your kids. Be like, you're taking on something that doesn't belong to you. So I'm going to go, where do I have anxiety? Where do I have stuff that doesn't belong to you? And my son had, talk about him. He had that happen every time my wife or I would like go outside the door, he would fly to see if we were leaving or something, that he felt like that there was this abandonment. And we started working on it, and it went away. It literally went away. I don't know if he matured out of it. I like to think that it's a constellation, but all the above, that the more that
That Joel was
he was 7 at the time.
How old do they have to be, do you think, before they can do this work?
So they don't, I don't recommend children to do constellations. Us as parents, until our children are emancipated, can do the constellations for them. They're just mirrors of our stuff, right? So they're just, very clear channels of the stuff that's going on with us internally. And so the more, us as parents, we can say, I'm going to bring in this dynamic. And it's like, it doesn't have it has nothing to do with them. It all has to do with you. And you're like, crap. So that's the power of it, is until they're emancipated, and emancipation can happen, as we all know, at very different ages. Until they're emancipated, we can do constellations for them. And that's where those orders of love in the family system are extraordinarily important, because we can, as parents, our main responsibility is the child, and their only responsibility is to take love. Our only responsibility is to give it, and their only responsibility is to take it, not to make us happy, not to fulfill the hole that we have in our lives, not to be our partners, not to be, all those are inappropriate relationships. The only thing is that they should rest in the love that we give them.
Thank you. That's a good answer. I like that answer. Where can listeners go if they feel called to explore this work further, whether through Zulu One, your workshops, or community work?
Yeah, so there's a massive community of family constellation facilitators globally, right? And South Florida has a ton of them. There's incredible workshops, and don't do mine, find somebody else's, right? Find anybody that resonates with you. They say that the right facilitator shows up at the right time for the right people. And there's communities on Facebook. There's a Reddit community that I manage that has family constellations, literally. And on our website on zuluon.org, that's ZULUONE.org, we host and post all the constellations that we have in Chicago and South Florida, and that we do across the country. And there's some, and now in, I think, March of 26, the International Family Constellations conference is happening as well. So there's tons of work out there. There's tons of literature, books, podcasts. The podcast that I host, the Zulu One podcast, has a ton of information on it as well.
A bit about this conference on March 26th. What's that?
So March it's a gathering of a lot of facilitators across the country or across the world that are going to come into North Carolina and are going to participate in a conference together. And so talks about everybody has their own style of family constellations. Constellations are they're very stylistic. Let's just put it that way.
They're creative.
They're very creative. Yeah. They're emergent, so from one way or another, but there's some people that are very kind of in the woo world. There's some people that are very in the very technical. There's some people that are in between, and there's structural constellations. There's constellations with horses. There's, constellations from all different walks of life. And
constellations with dogs.
I've never heard of it.
Huh.
Yeah. I've not heard of constellations with dogs.
Dogs is so into family.
They really are. Yeah, they really are. But constellations with horses has really been a thing. And then
horses.
Horses. Yeah. It's wild. It's,
how is that? Horses.
It's one of the craziest things that I've seen, but they literally uncover the hidden dynamics in the family system, just as a representative would do.
From your horse.
Yeah, from a horse.
Well, that's why I think dogs would be good.
Anyway. I think, yeah, I've never heard about it with dogs, but
I think that, with horses is one of the most wildest things I've ever heard. Who am I to judge? I sit in a room with complete strangers that start out with, with solid faces and then leave as a soul family. So, everybody's like, man, I don't know. I don't want to do this. Why am I here? Why did I get dragged into here? And then suddenly at the end, they're like, oh my gosh, this is the most, that was, and Tammy, I have to say this before we leave, is just, that was one of the most beautiful constellations I ever participated in. It's just, the before and after of you guys was just, and you're so courageous. It was just like, just kind of go up there and march in here and it's like, I'm going to do this thing for my friends. And it was just wild. I was just so humbled, and it was beautiful to experience that with you guys. And I'm so humbled that we were able to do that. And it was just, it was really beautiful to see the before and after that, like that little break that we took, and everybody was like, this is for real. So it was magical.
Thank you. Yeah. I told you I went to Al-Anon, right? That started my journey to being somebody who brought people together. I never was like that before that. Yeah. I would always be, I could do this on my own. I could do this on my own. I was always doing everything on my own.
Yeah.
And I'm just not like that anymore.
Yeah.
Just not like that anymore. Things have changed. And now having all those people, they're all so important to me. People I love.
They're beautiful. They're beautiful people. Yeah.
It's funny now because now I'll say, I want to introduce someone to another one of my friends, and they already know each other. Like,
yeah, I was just so humbled, and it was just, you see when people are truly of service to each other, and that was profoundly moving, and especially the setting and where we were and the spiritual aspect of it. It was full of grace. It was really beautiful.
Yeah,
thank you for that opportunity.
And you're both there together, I think, made it very deep and profound.
Yeah. She's an incredible woman. So grateful for her supporting me and supporting us through this process, that she was a courageous one and went to the Carpathian Mountains in Transylvania to do this wild work, out there 20 years ago, and then came back with this gift. It's profound. Yeah.
Well, thanks again.
Yeah. Thank you, Tammy.
We should stay in touch.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. We'll talk soon.
Thanks for tuning in to the Zulu One podcast. If you found value in today's podcast, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support means everything to us, and thank you for being part of this journey.